returning to Lesson 20. Lesson 18 was about the present participle. Lesson 19 was about the aorist, active, and middle. And Lesson 20 is mainly about the perfect, although it starts off with the aorist passive. I don't know, I might have put the aorist passive up in Lesson 19 just to keep all the aorists together, but Croy has split them up. So we'll go with this. So aorist passive is, you can see the theta that we're used to in the indicative where you had the theta eta. Here you have a theta, epsilon, iota in the forms, and you can see it here. And so you have the theta epsilon with then a nu tau, which we're used to being active, but in the just like in the indicative, the aorist passive used the secondary active endings. So again, the aorist passive here uses the active, what looks like active forms of the participle, even though it's passive, and you'll tell by the theta epsilon here. But the endings are third declension, first declension, third declension, as normal. And then, and then it goes into the perfect active and middle passive. So the difference between the aorist and the perfect is sometimes hard to see. But what I just want to emphasize for now, or just to make it easier, this isn't going to hold true, especially once you get into more technical things. But so where the present, so here, this is my main verb. I was eating. I'm referring back to this time of eating, and then the participle is giving some sort of background or something to this. So if I'm using a present participle, I'm using imperfective aspect, so the ongoing arrows. And so we would translate this as something like while sitting at the table, I was eating. Where when we do the aorist, it's more of a sequence. And so we would translate this as often after sitting at the table, I was eating. So it's emphasizing first I did this, and then this happened. Whereas the perfect participle emphasizes the ongoing state of the completed action. And so often this is translated as having sat at the table, I was eating. So here, what I'm focused on is I sat down, and now I'm in this state of sitting, and that is when I was eating. So focused on the ongoing state of the completed action. The completed action being I sat, and then the ongoingness being in that state of sitting is when I'm going to talk about I was eating and then continue with the story. So that's a difference, at least a way to think about the difference between the aorist and the perfect is something like aorist is more sequential, possibly, and then the perfect is often emphasizing the present ongoing result or state of an action. So, okay, the perfect, the forms of the perfect, comparing to the aorist we see doesn't have the augment because there's not tense outside of the indicative. So there's no tense in the aorist. We just focus on the aspect. However, in the perfect, you do see the reduplication still, because reduplication doesn't have to do with tense. the reduplication has to do with the aspect. This is alerting you to the combinative aspect. And so there's not an augment, there's not a pluperfect participle, there's not an augment, but there is still the reduplication, and that is the giveaway that this is a perfect participle. And if you remember, some reduplications often look like an augment. So if you have a participle that looks like it has an augment, it's probably perfect. It's probably a reduplication. Well, it would be. It would be a reduplication because it can't be an augment, because participles can't have augments. So, perfect, a key standout is the reduplication at the beginning of the stem, and then the participle morpheme is the coat here. Coat, and then plus the third declension, first declension, third declension endings for the active. And then for the middle and passive, we also get the reduplication, and then we get the men plus the second, first, second endings, declension endings. The difference is, just like in the perfect indicative, middle and passive, you don't have the connecting vowel. So where, if we go back up to the present middle passive, you have luomenos, you have the connecting vowel throughout, you have the omicron. Going back down to the perfect, we just have lumenos. There's no O there. There's no connecting vowel. So you just get reduplication and then the ending slapped right onto the stem without the connecting vowel in the middle passive. And there's no new endings. Second, first, second endings in the middle passive, and third, first, third in the active participles. And we're used to that. We're used to that. All of our participles, except the aorist passive, is the one that uses the active endings. But all the others in the active uses third declension, first declension, third declension for masculine, feminine, neuter, and then in the middle passive uses second, first, second for the endings. Okay, then lesson 20 ends with a few additions here. So one is on periphrastic participles, and what these are is a participle can be combined with a form of a me, and these aren't that hard. When they come up in Greek, they're pretty easy to translate and recognize. So we actually do this in English. So if we say, I was teaching, in English we are using a form of to be plus a participle. And so Greek can just do that too. And we get that, where do they get? Right here. Was teaching. So Greek has two ways to form the imperfect. They can use just the imperfect indicative, edidaskon, I was teaching, or they can do it with a me plus a participle, I was teaching. And they're translated the same, and there are debates of whether there's a difference, and they're because there's debates, it doesn't, the differences are hard to catch. And so at this state in your studies, you can just translate them pretty word for word. The one that's a little different is the periphrastic participles are often used for the perfect tense. So here you will have a present tense, a me, with a perfect participle. And you can just translate it as perfect. So here they have it translated, these things are written in the book of the law. You could also just translate this as, these things have been written in the book of the law. But even here, you can say these things, then we have esteem, are, and then you can see a perfect participle written in the book of the law. So even when you come across it, it's not these things. It's not hard to really pick up and translate. Usually, periphrastic participles don't cause too much difficulty. Okay, and then the last one here is Croy's calling nuances of the adverbial participle. And so he gives these different categories: time, manner, means, cause, condition, concession. And I think it's important to emphasize here that it's not as if there is a time participle, there's not a manner participle or a means participle. Like, these aren't different kinds of participles. They are normal participles that are being used in a particular way. So here, he speaking these things, the woman, his wife, entered the house. And so this is focused on time, and what actually indicates it is the eti here, while he was speaking these things, his wife entered the house. And so this is actually a genitive absolute. And so this is a normal adverbial participle, genitive absolute participle, but it's being used in a time way. It's focused on what he was doing while he was doing these things. Where here, like for manner here, if we translate this, having authority, the apostle was preaching in the synagogue. And so this is a normal adverbial participle, but it's being used to tell you how he's preaching. The apostle is preaching with authority, having authority, by means of some authority, or in the manner of authority. I conflated with means here. So here, the man saved the children, dying for them. And so we can, in English, say by dying for them. But notice, it's just a normal participle, but we'd say it's being used in a way to tell the means of how this man saved those children. And so we can go throughout the causal being like because, condition, like we would translate as an if then often. And then concession we would translate with a though, an although, or a yet, or something like that. But why I'm emphasizing this is you can often just translate it as you often would participles, just like with the ing, verb plus ing. And then secondarily think about why is the author using this participle? And then you can say he's using the participle to communicate time, manner, means, cause, condition, or concession. It's not as if it's a special feature of the participle itself, but these are uses that an author can do with a participle. Okay, and then that brings us to the end of this chapter.